Lincoln announced before the war, before the invasion, that they had intelligence that Putin was going to invade Ukraine. Now, that tactic, it occurs to me, is actually really useful to undermine the anti democratic steps of the Republican Party, which is currently on a theocratic bent, as was evidenced today in their questioning of Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And they were evidently hostile to federal law allowing for interracial marriage, and federal law allowing for gay marriage, and federal law allowing for bodily autonomy on the part of women. So we should refrain from just calling the GOP names. It gives them grist to their confected outrage, whereby they build a platform on fabricated or misplaced white grievance, and instead, say, oh, look, we're tapping into people's sense of loss of stature as being white and somehow at the top of a social hierarchy where they feel entitled, they feel that they're more authentically American, and they feel entitled to disregard one of the key engines of American exceptionalism and American excellence, which is the inherited gratitude that fires up a lot of people's contributions to the United States. The children of migrants and migrants themselves, people who contribute energy, who contribute a counterbalance to just the general entropy of society. They freshen America. I am broadcasting from my bathroom, so that is my daughter's mermaid Barbie and Dora doll in the background. My apologies. Oh, I got a low battery message, so I don't intend to broadcast for long, only to suggest that tactic of not just saying Putin's a war criminal, but saying what we predict Putin's going to do. So before the war, it was actually really effective to increase solidarity in Europe and increase solidarity for Ukraine in America, because the Biden administration will open with their knowledge to make a prediction. Once you make a prediction, you invite people to weigh in themselves or to have a personal response. Oh, do I think that prediction has merit? Will it come true or not? So people got more engaged with what would happen in Ukraine to an additional level than they would have otherwise, because the Biden administration was so open with what they understood from their intelligence agencies of the United States. So they said, yep, we have intelligence that Putin will invade Ukraine. People either said to themselves, oh, that's nonsense, he won't. Or they said, oh, well, maybe he will. And when he did invade Ukraine, that gets a lot of buy-in from people who go, wow, I didn't think it would happen. I've been proved wrong. So with the GOP, rather than saying, blah, blah, they're bigots, you say, I want to draw attention to the increasing amount of talk by Republican politicians that they are hostile to interracial marriage, that they are hostile to contraception, that they are hostile to marriage equality, they're hostile to gay marriage. And you bring up those quotes, you introduce them, and you make those predictions so that people then have a little bit of emotional investment in deciding whether or not you have any contributory wisdom, whether you're telling the truth. You make those predictions. You don't name call. You don't just feed into the petulance of, oh, how dare you call us bigots? I'm going to go and vote for Republicans because Republicans flatter me and tell me I'm persecuted because I'm white, and that the true racism in America is against white people, and it's an honest idea of American history, and it's racist to even have the concept of critical race theory, which is sophisticated theory that at an institutional level, racist ideology and racist ways of thinking can permeate even revered institutions, and that it's worth leaving behind an uncritical acceptance of American institutions, of the American Constitution, of anything, to be brave enough to be a little bit open to criticism, to be open to suggestions that America is not always perfect, that the founding framers may have erred in not granting the vote to women, or in giving enhanced power and influence to powerful slave owners because they allowed for disproportionate influence in the Senate from small population states that had lots of acreage and lots of agriculture and lots of profit from slave owning activities and slavery adjacent industries, uh, and that having an electoral college system to overpower the results of the popular vote was also a way of distributing power in the United States to people who, at the stage of the Constitution being written, were anxious. A way to placate the anxieties of people who were worried that they would be outvoted by the higher population numbers of people in states where abolitionists had a lot of political currency. So, assuage the fears of white slave owners, there were certain provisions made in the American Constitution, and those provisions are seen to come into play more strongly when there's a bigger rural-urban divide. And then the the racial legacy, the confected legacy of enslaving people with dark-colored skin comes into play, because not all people descended from slave owners are currently racist, but there is a more enduring legacy in some areas of the United States of racism. That means people are still being taught from certain textbooks that deny the severity, deny the inhumanity of enslaving others, and consequently want to deny uh, the long shadow of that type of thinking, that internalized perception that people who were enslaved and the descendants of people who were enslaved are somehow unworthy, are deserving of lower status, deserve to be excluded from swimming pools, deserved to be on the receiving end of um, purposeful economic disadvantaging, such as redlining, where you exclude Black Americans from qualifying for home loans, qualifying from the ability to get a mortgage and build intergenerational wealth through the acquisition of property. So those are all important things that I always want to emphasize to Americans, because it's so important for a critical mass of us to know that we have to mobilize each other. We have to make an active effort at every election, not just presidential elections, but at midterm elections, to counteract the persistent effect of social hierarchical thinking, of the desire to build a theocracy in the United States so that we are all once again more subjugated to a white patriarchal system in which women are relatively disenfranchised. Women don't have the legal right to decide to proceed with a pregnancy or not. Women don't have the right to gatekeep what happens in their bodies. And women don't have the right to marry another woman if they want. Lots of ways of disenfranchising people who don't fit into patriarchal family structure, and women and people of color, and Black people, and Native American people, all the kind of people who occupied, who've had generations of people fighting to elevate their access to rights that other people might take for granted. Generations of civil rights activists who have helped introduce amendments to the Constitution. So when a conservative person says they're an originalist, they're probably an originalist to the worst parts of the Constitution, the parts that placated, that appeased powerful, wealthy slave owners at the time of America's founding. So yes, even though American democracy has a lot going for it, and giving women the vote and amending the Constitution is a way forward to show the world that living under a rule of law rather than some kind of corrupt dictatorship like Vladimir Putin's Russia, or or a communist dictatorship, um, or any of the innumerable perversions of democracy, or just completely non-democratic systems in which people are oppressed in myriads of different ways. America has been a shining example of how to pursue democracy, and civil rights activists have been really key to America living up to its best self and making its idealism part of a day-to-day existence. And that excellence has attracted migrants from around the world. It has given America sometimes a type of moral authority that has, yes, often been abused, but a moral authority to help defeat the Nazis in World War II, to defeat the Germans in World War One, to push back against some of the most obvious excesses. Yeah, definitely not perfect. Definitely American influence and American might has been abused, but America does have significant geopolitical stature and is often a power for good around the world. And I'm happy to celebrate that. And I disavow all the nihilistic, left-leaning, communist type people who claim to be anti-imperialist but have really lent into Putin's so great because he's anti-American, and we just cannot endure any worldview in which America has any goodness to it. So those people are insufferable twats, and I disavow them. They're not really part of the left. They often talk about how they won't vote for Joe Biden. Democrats. Their ideological claims to be pure are often so unreasonable and so impractical that they sabotage the possibility of goodness. And their refusal to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016 because she wasn't pure enough for them led to all of the hardships mostly endured by the economic underclass demographic in the United States, which disproportionately includes people of color in the United States. Even if some Black Americans choose to vote for Trump and choose to support the Republican Party because they've fallen for the conflation of Republican Party with fiscal prudence or economic wisdom and ignore the actual evidence that Republicans in office typically introduce recessions, typically mess up the economy, typically create a mess for Democrats to clean up when in office, and the media, often to show balance, holds Democratic politicians accountable or creates an impression of fairly holding Democrats accountable for what happens when that same due diligence hasn't been applied to Republicans because the noisy wheels get the oil. Has anybody, the squeakiest wheel gets the oil or something, and Republicans have made a business out of disingenuously, performatively getting mad and working the refs, getting mad about various indignities that aren't really indignities. So, their current fabrications are, parents are being deprived of the right to control school curriculums. When did parents have the right to control school curriculums? Parents are all different. They don't get to collectively decide. There's such a thing as people voted into public office. There's there's the Secretary of Education. There's a lot of different contributing factors to curriculums. The squeakiest parent letter saying, "I'm so outraged my child learnt about slavery or learnt about Jim Crow or learnt about modern American history or learnt about how even in Virginia, public schools were closed down at one stage rather than integrate." Like, there's so much to learn in American history that doesn't always reflect well on the collective actions of white people. And that's okay to learn, because you also have to learn as you go through life the ability to not hold yourself responsible for other people's misdeeds. And if they are part of your demographic group, to just strengthen your resolve to advocate for justice and do what you can to make things better or to do better going forwards. Children get to learn that. We all need to learn that at a rapid pace because we're all collectively facing an existential crisis of climate change with very evident, increasingly frequent and increasingly severe unnatural disasters caused by the destabilization of our climate, which is a product of human activity, but particularly industrialized human activity, adding a lot of gases to the atmosphere that trap heat. So we all have to learn how to not just wallow in, oh dear, we've overconsumed or we've all subscribed to modes of transport that contribute significantly to this problem. We have to be able to put that behind us and go, what are we going to do better? Let's work together to raise awareness and elect people who can address the problem, negate the power and influence of coal-captured corrupt politicians like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, and get America a geopolitical leader to do more to address climate change and the peril that we are all collectively in, from more floods, more fires, more storms, more tornadoes, more hurricanes, etc., etc. We all need to do that. It's a learning curve. Get on board. So, I see Christopher. Christopher, thank you for inspiring me to come on to HAPS and do a show, and I'll try and do it more regularly. My audience is so lovely and supportive. I really appreciate that. And when I find people online who can articulate things clearly and well, I beg them to go on a broadcast with me, and people will sometimes, they don't know me from a bar of soap. And they say, oh, no, I'm busy. But if anybody in the audience puts any faith in their own ability to talk, I am more than willing to bounce ideas off another person, to just chat casually without any affectations of pretending to be experts. It's just there's some things that are now, there's enough awareness, there's enough information out there accessible to everyone. You don't have to to pretend to be an expert to be able to say, let's talk about climate change and let's talk about what it means for us and for our children and for our societies. There's enough information out there to pick a side, basically, and to say, yes, Putin is a mass murdering sociopath with an ideology that wants to expand Russia and restore the glory of the Soviet Union. There's enough information out there that we don't have to be an expert to say that is bad. We might not know what to do militarily or how to respond, but we can be more united in our condemnation, and we can be more united in our condemnation of Republicans who stood with Putin, who encouraged Donald Trump, who claimed to befriend Putin, who styles himself almost as a protege of Putin, and admiring that kind of dictatorial energy around the world, that strongman, performative strength where you say, oh yeah, I'm so crazy, I'm so unpredictable, Kim Jong-un won't ever go attack us because I intimidated him by calling him Little Rocket Man on Twitter. And some people fall for that and say, yes, Trump's performative strongman characteristics are what will keep us safe. That kind of gullibility needs to be called out for what it creates in the world. And it creates instability. It creates nihilistic people who just join on to Trump's bandwagon because he creates solidarity around hating certain demographics of the American population. He feeds into that argument that authentic Americans are white and Christian, and he feeds people's compulsion to believe that only Republicans deserve to rule America, because nobody really believes anymore that Republican voters have soundly bought into the arguments about the election being stolen from Trump. There was no evidence, 62 court cases ruled against Trump, no court cases ruled in his favor. There was the insurrection, people have been convicted. So there's been a lot of due process and a lot of pushback, even from some Republicans saying it's a lie and we shouldn't be complicit in spreading this lie. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. But the pushback from Republicans against members of their own party, long-standing conservatives like Liz Cheney, for calling out Donald Trump's lies, show their appetite for those lies, shows their attachment to the idea that Democrats never deserve to hold office, and therefore any victory by a Democratic presidential candidate is an indignity, cannot stand, and has to be overthrown in some way. That is their basic assumptions, because their whole natures are modeled around the idea that if they're white, that is their passport to authentic American citizenship. And that negates so much of what good people fought for in the United States. And when we make it clear that that legacy is what's being challenged by a lot of Republican voters and a lot of their thought leaders in their Republican Party, then we know what we are articulating. We know what we are trying to appeal to a middle ground. And we can't just waste all our energies bewailing over radicalized Republicans. We have to mobilize and enthuse moderates in the Democrat Party, so that they don't get disheartened or lose morale from the fact that governance in America is difficult because there are baked in obstructions. You have to get, well, the filibuster is baked in, not permanent. It could be overturned, but the filibuster is this process by which governance can be stymied, by which legislation can't be passed unless you have 60 votes, which is a ridiculously high bar, and a ridiculously dysfunctional obstruction to put in the way of Americans wanting good political outcomes for their country, wanting outcomes that help people, like a continuation of the child tax credit or a continuation of Joe Biden's economic strategies that have done so much to revitalize the American economy over the last year since Biden has been in office, and have helped restore a lot of the jobs market, a lot of the damage done by Trump in office and Trump's ridiculous posturing strongman tariff game that he played, which undermined America's trading relationships and made it basically put the manufacturing sector into recession with contingent, what are they called, adjacent industries that were also beginning to fall into recession in October 2019. And could account for one reason why Trump completely neglected America as the pandemic unfolded, and in fact did a lot to sabotage America's pandemic response, because he had an economic excuse for the recession of his own making that was a product of his strongman posturing that feeds into the emotions of his followers. Bob notes that if planting can't begin soon, there will be huge world shortages. Yes, although Ukraine's making a big effort to at least achieve a 70% benchmark of their usual wheat production, but Russia also produces wheat. And yes, a lot of countries on the border of hunger, a lot of people will find it difficult to afford food. A lot of people on the margins of economic viability will struggle, will be pushed into poverty, and many will experience hunger and outright starvation, and many will die. So that's another reason to hope for Putin's swift overthrow, if that's possible, from his own inner circle. If people begin to disagree with him enough, begin to disagree with the scale of the war crimes that his army is being instructed to commit in Ukraine. And yes. Oh, there's another comment from Bob that says, speaking of Black history, we all learned 50 plus. All we learned was the story of George Washington Carver, and that's all. George Washington was really persistent in trying to recapture any slaves that escaped from him. That's one novel thing that I learned about George Washington. Oh, all the Black history you learned was George Washington Carver, the agricultural scientist who thought of a lot of different things to do with peanuts and introduced a lot of agricultural technological developments to the United States, a lot of farming improvements. Yes, I've learned of him through my children. But anyway, I'd better go. Cool photo center burst to Davcat. Bursts seem to be new things. I don't know what bursts are, but that's exciting. It's like a little heart burst. But yes, I will go and go to sleep. But thank you so much to anybody who joined in and listened to today's broadcast. And I don't know if it's shared to Twitter or if you're just getting to see it on Haps. But yeah, I'm gonna work around this. I'm gonna work to familiarize myself more with the new Haps settings. I kind of ignored it when they changed the setup because I couldn't share a screen anymore. But I'll find out. I'll use my laptop, I'll tinker, I'll find a way to share a screen. And if not, then I guess I'll just be here delivering monologues. Bob says it's been a while. I was broadcasting through StreamYard, which is a different platform, for a little bit. So you could see me through Twitch. It said it was sharing to Twitter as well and YouTube. So my YouTube channel, which is also DavCat43, should have some of my more recent videos there, but it's true they have not been numerous. I have not been profligate with my output, but there are people who supported me on Patreon this whole time, and I just want to say I'm so grateful, and I will repay you in terms of output, and I will become more productive. I promise. I went back to visit Australia. I'm not going back again. It's so far away from America that the jet lag was awful coming back. Not so awful for me, but awful for my daughter. And that means awful for me because she wanted to party all night for a few nights. And it wasn't her fault. She just couldn't sleep. Her body was just so wired in the middle of the night. So yeah, I'll just do Zoom calls to stay in touch with family going forward. And just if we're going to have a holiday, we'll just travel to parts of America. There's lots we want to see. I want to see the Grand Canyon. I want to go to New York again. Hopefully cases will be lower. I know the BA2 variant of Omicron, people are watching it to see if it will lead to another spike. But Bob wants to know how my dad is in Australia. He's getting married, and he's getting married very annoyingly next month, because we were just there. We were like, oh, you were getting married? You so could have organized us. We were here. We could have gone to the wedding, but we're not going back to Australia right after we left. So, but anyway, the main thing is, hooray for my dad. He's remarrying, and I'm very happy for him, and I'm very happy he's found a lovely, supportive person to share his life with and to make his time happy and fulfilled. So that's good. I will attend his wedding via Zoom. I'm sure somebody will hold up a phone for me to. Oh, Bob says say hello to Mr. Dav. I will, Bob. I will say hello to Bob. Bob says great chat. Thank you, Bob. I'm indebted to all the people on Twitter who make an effort to educate each other and me by extension. Yeah, thank you so much. Bob and Christopher and anybody else out there who's a regular viewer, and thanks to any replay viewers as well. Speak out. Use the Biden administration's tactics that they used against Putin, which is to make a prediction and say it's a prediction, and make people realize that make people invest in a side, because they have to ask themselves those difficult questions. Are they actually interested in voting for a political party that is hoping to undermine the legality of gay marriage and interracial marriage and make it be decided on a state by state basis? Bob's asking if I like the education system in Massachusetts. Yes, I definitely do. 2 thumbs up for my neck of the woods. The teachers are really invested. It's been hard for my daughter because she repeated half a year because of the difference in time zones. I mean, the difference in school year times. So she repeated half of a year, and so she's been a little bit under challenged, but she really likes her friends. She likes doing craft, and she's doing well. And they're both learning Spanish. It's really cool. And you can learn extra stuff if you want outside of home, and the teachers are supportive. My son's teacher writes things like, oh, I'm so excited to see what he'll share with the class. He's like me. Christopher says, take care, lady. Thank you, Christopher. All the best to you. Oh, bye bye, everyone. Take care.